Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Joe Knows. Today I'm going to talk about strength and mixed martial arts. For whatever reason this past week, I got a ton of questions from people asking me how important I felt strength was or wasn't in MMA. So that's what I'll discuss today. And obviously, if you asked me this question back in 1994, when the UFC first came out and I was watching UFC 1, my answer would be much different. You know, I think I was like everybody else who watched that. I watched in amazement as Royce Gracie just dismantled guys that were bigger than him, stronger than him, more intimidating looking than him. At that point, strength didn't matter. He totally negated his opponent's strength, size, conditioning. It didn't matter. He was at such another level technically that he dominated everybody in front of him. And it was amazing to watch. So at that point, it was a lot different. But at that point, I would say the majority of people he was fighting never even heard of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I remember him being on his back during one of the fights, and one of the announcers even thought the fight was over because he was on his back, and seconds later he was choking his opponent out from his back and the fight was over. So nobody knew what was going on at that point. But like everything else in life, things started to evolve, and fast forward a number of years, and now everyone started to become a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, or at least well-versed in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Everybody became well-versed in striking. Everybody started to become good at everything, and the playing field got a lot more even. And that's when things really started to get interesting and the sport started to evolve. And I remember watching back in 2005 or 2006. I don't remember the year. And listen, I don't consider myself an MMA expert or any kind of historian, but I love the sport. I follow it. I've trained some mixed martial artists, so I'm just going to give you my opinion. But the fight that stands out to me to this day was Sean Sherk versus Kenny Florian. It was a title fight, and for 5 rounds, Sean Sherk pretty much dominated Kenny Florian. He totally controlled Florian and controlled that fight. Yet, on paper, those were two guys that most would agree had very even technical skill. Or, I think most people, if you had to pick, would even say Kenny Florian technically was the better fighter, but Sean Sherk was, if you look at their physiques, he just was so much stronger. He had that kind of short, jacked physique where Kenny Florian is more long and lean. Basically, he's skinny, even though they're in the same weight class. Two completely different body types. And the stronger, more powerful dude dominated his opponent for that entire fight. And I think people started opening up their eyes and seeing that strength really can play a role when all other factors are equal. Or it could even be that deciding factor or give you that edge if your opponent does have a little bit of a technical advantage on you. And listen, a guy like Brock Lesnar is another great example. When Brock came in the UFC, yes, he's a tough guy. He has that great amateur wrestling background, but from a mixed martial arts standpoint, I don't think anyone would consider him a very advanced, very technical MMA fighter. But he was so much stronger than everyone and just bigger than everyone. He won the UFC title in almost no time. So again, I feel like that's where the sport started to evolve and people started to respect strength. And now, I would say every fighter in the UFC, or 95% plus of MMA fighters, have some kind of formal strength and conditioning program. And while I feel it's great that more and more MMA fighters are seeing the importance of strength and incorporating strength training into their programming, Unfortunately, most of them are going about it in the wrong way. And what I mean by that is most of them are turning their strength training workouts into conditioning workouts. And I'm sure you've seen it many times. How many times have you seen the MMA athlete in the weight room doing things like battle ropes and burpees and just exercise after exercise in these 5-minute circuits in an attempt to improve their quote-unquote conditioning levels? And while those circuits do have their place, I'm not saying they should never be used, and they could definitely help improve your conditioning as an MMA athlete. I still feel like the best way to get in shape for any sport is to play your sport. And MMA is no different. So the best way to get in fight shape is through your fight training. So the things that you're doing, in a cage, on a wrestling mat, in a boxing ring, you could do things where you simulate a fight, where you do 5-minute rounds, 3 or 5-minute rounds. That's the best place to get in fight shape, sport-specific shape. Anything you do in the weight room will always be secondary to your actual fight training. So that's where the majority of your quote-unquote conditioning should come from. And then the majority of what you do in the weight room should be focusing on improving your strength and power. Because when you think about it, MMA consists of a bunch of movements that require a tremendous amount of strength and power. Think about it. Throwing a punch, throwing a kick, shooting in on someone and taking them down. The isometric strength to choke somebody out. Those are all expressions of power. And you're not going to improve your strength and your power if you're always training in a fatigued state. You can't improve your strength and power, your maximal outputs, if you're always performing some kind of circuit training and you're always training in a fatigued state. The best way to improve your strength and power is in the weight room, and there's two variables that need to be addressed. Proper recovery time in between sets and the quality of your reps. The quality of your jumps and throws and lifts are very, very important. That's the only way you're going to take your strength and your power to the next level. And again, you can't do that by always incorporating circuit training. And you might say, yeah, but in a fight, I'm never going to get full recovery, so why would I do it in the weight room? You're right. In the fight, you're not going to get full recovery. That's why you're doing your conditioning, through your fight training. And then we're going to develop your maximal strength and power. We're going to improve your maximal outputs so you could punch harder, kick harder, shoot in on somebody quicker. We're going to improve all those things in the weight room. And I'm telling you, if you improve your maximal outputs in the weight room and you improve that punching power and that kicking power, that does have an effect on your conditioning and your operational outputs. In other words, if you improve your strength and power so you could throw a more powerful punch or a more powerful kick or a quicker takedown, when you are fatigued and you're only operating at 80% or 82% in that third round, I'm telling you, your 82% is going to be at a higher level than it was before you improved your maximal outputs. Trust me, you boost up your maximal outputs and you will operate at a higher level when you're in a fatigue state as well. So you got to incorporate some true strength and power development into your programming, at least during certain months, certain times of the year. I'll be the first to say, if you have a fight, if you're an MMA athlete and you are getting ready for a fight, as the fight gets closer, technical skill and conditioning become the most important things you need to focus on. So your strength work, you only have so much energy reserve. So the strength work would go down to a maintenance level, and yes, you would focus more on your conditioning and your technical skill. But at some points in the season, during your off season, at some points during the course of that year, that calendar year, you should be focusing on improving your maximal outputs in the weight room, and that will have a very, very positive effect on your fight game. So that is my take on the subject. Hope you guys enjoyed that. If you did, I appreciate you giving it a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. I got new Joe Knows videos coming at you each and every week. If you have a topic you would like me to cover, make sure you drop me a comment in the comment section below, and I will see you next time. Thanks, guys.